Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Khalil Doheny. I'm Director of Content Marketing at Digital Niche Agency. Today we have Bill Reed, CEO of RemotelyMe. Bill, how you doing today?
Fantastic. Thanks.
Of course, awesome. And Bill, I'm going to allow you to, introduce your guests here and then kind of just lay out the land of what we can expect from this fireside chat today.
Absolutely. Well, hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us today for our special event about helping veterans and their families, and for that matter, all employees, thrive and not just survive at work. As mentioned, I'm your host, Bill. I'm a former submariner neighbor diver, also CEO at RemotelyMe. Today, we're going to explore some of the key challenges that we've seen with recruiting, onboarding, learning and development, and so forth, with two of our guest speakers, Dr. Jon Belsher, who's an MD, also an executive advisor for medtech and health tech firms, and also a veteran, former chief of aerospace medicine for the Arizona Air National Guard, 162nd Fighter Wing, and also Joshua Galle, talent acquisition manager with Petoskey Plastics, and he's also a former combat U.S. Marine. Start with Jon. Perhaps if you could just take a moment to say hello.
Good to be here, Bill, with you. I look forward to this discussion. Thank you.
You know, Jon, whenever I'm asked who I should notify in case of an emergency, I always say a really good doctor. Josh, can you please also take a moment to say hello?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Bill. And I'm glad to be here and look forward to this conversation. And hopefully we have some fellow veterans out there to talk with today.
Absolutely. And Josh, I'm sure you can appreciate it as an HR exec. I'm sure you know that the brain is an amazing thing. It starts to work when we first get up, and it doesn't stop working until we get into the office.
Absolutely. I think that our brains are fascinating things. And if we're lucky, we continue to fill it with really good things. And then we see good results in the workplace.
All right, well, let's get rolling. Let's talk about what some of the common challenges are that companies are facing today, especially when it comes to the talent acquisition side of the fence, corporate training, and of course, a lot of the bias that we're seeing within this arena, especially for veterans and their families and for our diverse individuals. So, Josh, let's start with you. What's your opinion about what this challenge is today in finding and attracting some of these best candidates?
Well, Bill, I think it would be important to look at where we are in this world right now. Post-pandemic, major pandemic that our world has never seen the proportions of. It impacted the workforce on so many factors. Isolation to protect ourselves from the virus led to many having to learn to work in very different environments, including remote work. And that changed, I think, the way that we approach work. That also led to lots of disruption for businesses in various different industries. And that meant that a lot of people were disrupted. Their positions in some cases were eliminated. A lot of different traditional positions or workplaces were also closed, some permanently and some for periods of time. So for me, what I view in the post-pandemic and in this current situation is a new work environment that has all kinds of challenges. There are financial challenges, there are skill shortages out there. Organizations are having to completely restructure and reapproach the way that they look at the job market and they look at talent. And so these are all factors that HR executives and business executives alike face in the current industry and the current marketplace.
Gotcha. You know, Dr. Jon, on the other side of the fence, we're talking about those candidates that are trying to find good jobs. There are some challenges there as well. And of course, in your experience, not only military, but also med tech, health tech side of the fence. What are you seeing in terms of those who are seeking, especially the veterans and others out there, some of the challenges that they're facing in trying to get hired or maybe get promoted?
You bet. So to Josh's point, I think there's been a shift, if you will, in the mindset and a new paradigm we've entered that's been accelerated through the pandemic and then post-pandemic period of time. I think employees potentially have a lot of different options now, but part of the trouble is coming down to isolating or finding the right options for them. I do think as able candidates look around the country or within their state at different job opportunities, it's always hard for individuals to determine if the fit is right or not, if the role is going to be the right one for them. I think employees today are thinking a lot more broadly about their work environment and their work-life balance. And that's causing them to think more carefully and try to find out more information about the roles they're applying for.
Gotcha. Now, Josh, let's say you are fortunate enough to find those individuals that maybe look like they could come on board. We all know that a very high percentage say no, or maybe they get attracted to some other position. For your shortlist candidates, often you need to rely on a hiring manager or interview opinions. And that's important because one bad hire could cost your firm $250,000. So talent assessments might be able to help you, or maybe some other things, but what's your opinion about these current test-based tests, and do they have the maybe potential to interject some bias into the hiring process?
Yeah, Bill, thank you. I think that's a very good question and something that we all discuss and need to discuss more. What I would say are more of the standard industry standard text-based assessments that have been used in some cases for decades in the workforce. Many of those, they might have served a purpose in time, but with all the changes and all the different variables we have today, I feel like we need to continue to increase our aptitudes and use technology to our advantage to do a better job in assessing talent. I am a huge fan of using technology, but not in a sense of replacing the human-to-human interaction, but using technology to work alongside us and helping us to work smarter, not harder. And when it comes to talent assessments, it's very important to use technology that's going to remove or mitigate the biases, or at least allow a hiring manager and a hiring team to understand that there are biases in those hiring processes, and we have to know what they are, we have to identify them, and we have to find ways to assess talent without over-screening or kicking out all the talent, because sometimes there are talented people out there that come from different backgrounds, different environments, and they may not initially look like they fit the scope or the position that we're looking for. But if you spend some time and you use certain tools, you can actually uncover that they match a lot of the skills or the aptitudes that your company is actually looking for.
Yeah, great thoughts there. Now, John, we know that there's 20 million veterans out there today, and more than half are in the workforce. But there's also about 3 times that many relatives. But as we just heard from Josh, some of these current hiring practices and the assessments and so forth can be biased against this community, and not being able to really translate what their experience might be. What's your opinion about, and what have you seen in this respect?
I do think, Bill, to your point, it's a great question. There is a divide, if you will, or an issue with regard to what our dedicated service members have done during their long and storied careers, generally in the military, defending our freedom, and then trying to translate that into the civilian sector to try to find the right match, if you will. And so I do think there's an inherent issue or problem in making that transfer for people. And I think, candidly, employers are missing out. We're missing out on the civilian sector because I think there are a lot of people who perhaps are not able to apply for the job that they're qualified for or that they would be a good fit for, because the tools we're utilizing today, the screening methods we're typically using, are not taking into account this breadth of experience.
Yeah, very good points. And in relation to that, Josh, why do you believe that HR executives should be looking to prioritize hiring more veterans and their relatives?
Yeah, thanks, Bill. I think that's an excellent question. One that I've tried in my post-military career to highlight. It takes a lot of us as military veterans to share our experiences, what we learned, and how it relates to the workforce and to the specific position or role that we've been assigned to. I believe that there are a few universal skill sets that all military veterans bring. The first and foremost that I think is most important to an organization is that as a military veteran, it does not matter what branch of service, what rank, or what specific job that you held while in service. We are all agile learners, meaning that we can learn in different environments through different learning mechanisms, and we can acquire the skills and the aptitudes that we need quickly to meet a variety or myriad of different circumstances and in different environments. So I think agile learning, and I also believe that we are trained in the military at all levels and at all branches to work as a cohesive team, and teamwork, collaboration, and communication are some of the most critical skills needed in today's workforce.
Absolutely. Now, John, as a doctor, what's your thinking in relation to perhaps HR executives exploring these more modern solutions, moving away from some of the text-based and some of these other antiquated assessments, et cetera, invented 50 some years ago, that and maybe moving more towards brain science, neuroscience, behavioral science, some of the things we've learned over the past decade or so to perhaps eliminate some of the bias and avoid some of these bad hire risks?
Great question, Bill. It's imperative, I believe, and I think that it's a win-win. And in my career, in my life, anytime it's a win-win and there are few to no losing parties, it seems like the logical direction to go. It's a win for employers because I think employers have an inherent interest in driving down their churn and finding the right candidates for specific roles. If you want, employers want to find the right match, if you will. They don't want to make the wrong match and have someone end up being trained and then leave because they didn't feel like the job met their expectations. So they have an inherent interest. The employee has an inherent interest because I would argue that most people want to find a match or a relationship with an employer that lasts a period of time and that they can feel involved with. So I think utilizing tools that we now have available to us to better match employers with employees can only be a win for both parties. And importantly, not only a win from a work and productivity standpoint, but a win from a financial standpoint. Labor expenses are the #1 expense, and these are very pricey and important decisions that these two parties are making.
Absolutely. Now, Josh, as you know, Gallup says that almost 80% of workers now don't trust employers, and so therefore many of them are disengaged. As many as 18% could be disgruntled and might actively harm your company. How do you see that as creating some huge risks for employers and, for that matter, security professionals, because one disengaged employee could lead to a security breach?
Absolutely, Bill. I believe security, especially information security, and trying to contain breaches of sharing information, especially proprietary information, is a major trust issue. And that's one that I believe, back to an earlier question, when we talk about these assessments that have been used in the industries over the years, they can't test for those trust factors. They cannot highlight with any great detail is their answers on that test actually going to demonstrate, is that person trustworthy, and are they going to be able to mitigate any of those risks? And my answer I would say honestly is no. There are serious risks today in our workforce. It's almost every day we see another company that's had a data breach, and sometimes those are internal risks, and sometimes those are external risks. And I believe it's very imperative for HR leaders, for IT executives and business executives to continue to partner together to assess these risks and come up with solutions in their workforce to protect the company, but protect the data of all parties out there. So trust issues is a major focus right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, the new National Institutes of Standard and Technology Cybersecurity Framework 2.0 has a line item in it under the govern function that requires that the CISO, Chief Information Security Officer, and the HR executives must be on the same page because they realize this is the case. So, John, let's get the other side of the fence on this in relation to the disengagement. We know that stress in the workplace, of course, by these reports, that's where a lot of this disengagement is coming from. And being a doctor, you know that stress, of course, increases cortisol, norepinephrine, et cetera, and can cause some serious issues with people in general that can lead to some of these things, such as disengagement or even somebody to be disgruntled. What's your thinking around this?
Well, I can't dispute what you just described. It's absolutely the case, and it's not that you have low levels of these chemicals or not, or high levels. It's a continuum, if you will, Bill. So everyone's somewhere on that continuum, and it depends how stressful the environment is. Certainly, stress, I would argue, in an employee because of a trust issue leads to an employee who may well be not as productive, not as effective, not as bought in, and not as valuable from a contribution standpoint for a company. So I think companies have a vested interest in having happy, low stress employees, enabling them to focus on the mission and the tasks at hand more effectively than their stress counterparts.
And by the way, Deloitte absolutely agrees with you. Their study that came out about the same time as the Gallup 2023 State of the Workplace report last year shows that if we can turn this around and we can hire and train for more high trust, we can see a 400% increase in business performance and a 211% increase in more retention, which would make Josh happy. Josh, what's your thinking? Do you agree that perhaps measuring and improving trust should be a key performance indicator, or OKR as they call it, objectives and key results, a way for a measurement to be taken in some respect, metrics around this for HR executives?
Absolutely, Bill. When we speak about trust factors, I think the old industry word would be soft skills. And while sometimes we've focused on the more technical skills and meeting all the technical requirements, I believe the soft skills are proving once again to be a very important factor. And so trust factors, soft skills, I think go hand in hand. And so readjusting our metrics and how we assess for trust and these soft skills is of vital importance. And it is as important, if not more important, than some of the technical skills, because technical skills in some cases, in some jobs, can sometimes be acquired on the job. Whereas a soft skill and trust issues, you either have it or you don't. It's not usually something that you can quickly acquire and move forward. You either have it as an individual and it came from training, upbringing, and prior experiences. And that's why organizations need to prioritize assessing for these soft skills or these trust issues, trust factors.
John, let's dive into this a little bit deeper, especially in relation to the security risk we talked about earlier. So I want to understand a little bit better how these stress factors can impact the human body, and also maybe some issues that are going on in personal life, but also in work. We spend more of our time at work than we do at home. It's pretty important for us to be able to have a high trust environment where we feel trusted as well, and we don't have this much stress, because that can lead to perhaps sleep disorders, and then you have the mistakes, and then you get the disengaged employees And Gartner says 99% of these security breaches are caused by these human mistakes that can lead to the security risks and costs. So give us a little more insight into what's going on in the brain and the human body, et cetera, in these environments that are maybe difficult.
You bet. So, as we spoke about earlier, I think individuals have a certain threshold, if you will, of stress that they can tolerate. And I'll say this, and I think I'd speak for you gentlemen too. No one is immune from stress. All of us have it at different levels at different times. And the thing we need to think about, Bill, is we can't just focus on the stress alone at work, but work is on top of home, if you will. And many people, if not the most, have stressful issues at home and in their personal life from time to time. And that's going to come into work from time to time too. We can't necessarily control that outside of work, personal issues, stresses, et cetera, but we can control it better in the work environment, in the employment environment. And I think by lowering that stress again and ensuring that there are high trust levels, and to Josh's point, soft skills are just so important and becoming more important. I speak regularly on bedside manners for physicians, and it's similar in a way. 20, 30 years ago, I don't think we spent much time thinking about what are your soft skills like. We were exclusively focused on, could you do the job? It's different than what Josh described. Obviously, physicians aren't being trained on the job or learning on the job, but there's some similarities in terms of these soft skills, in my mind, without regard to where you are in the economy today, are becoming increasingly important. Employers recognize this, and it's just something that we can't overlook.
Absolutely. And you make a really valid point in terms of how the home life and the work life can impact each other. I've done some volunteer work for teens within some distressed homes and see it all the time. There's work stress and work issues, and you can't let that out at work because you don't want to get fired. And so you bring it home, and that causes these issues in your home life as well. And then that turns itself into issues in your work. It's just uh, this problem that just keeps going round and round. So in relation to maybe some things that we can look at or do to help resolve some of these issues that we're seeing. And this is especially true for the veteran community and their relatives, especially those that are making the transition. It can be quite stressful, even though they've dealt with a lot of stress in the military life. Now there's a different kind of stress in their new work life. Well, let's talk about how perhaps learning and development might be able to help us with this. However, the stats show that almost 90% of current learning and development has been ineffective. A lot of firms don't provide personalized corporate training programs that can help with this. So, Josh, take a minute to talk about what you've seen in relation to the learning and development that's being offered in the corporate world.
Absolutely, Bill. Back to the soft skills and those trust factors. I think organizations are having to start to pivot. The on-the-job training or the learning and development was often focused on continued training on the technical skills and not as much so on the soft skills and the trust factors. And I believe organizations are having to embrace that. I'm hearing more and more organizations, their learning and development teams, their human resources teams, even their frontline supervisors asking for soft skill training, particularly emotional intelligence, understanding who we are, what makes us tick, how we show up, how we communicate, and how we come across to others, and then how we perceive others' communication and collaboration with us, and what does that do to our minds and to the way that we are built and wired. And so I feel that these training programs and continuing to fine tune it is very important. For my organization, we just recently added local trainers at a plant level to focus, yes, on technical skills. There are certain technical skills that we have to continue to develop and train on, but also we are focused on delivering soft skills and emotional training, leadership skills, various different skill levels, and we're bringing that at a plant level with these plant trainers.
And soft skills are important. So both LinkedIn and Harvard concur that about 90% of our job failures, and of course, therefore, our success, are related to the soft skills. But unfortunately, most firms have that the other way around. They're typically training more for the hard skills, about 75%. And now we're seeing a change over to skills-based hiring. But perhaps, Jon, I'd like to get your opinion on this. Would it be helpful for employees if we were to provide more training in relation to how we deal with stress in the workplace, how we can deal with our diet and exercise, how we can deal with our health factors and other things that maybe can impact us and cause these issues that we're having?
Absolutely. I think it can only help, if you will. I think first having the awareness around these different type of factors and the implications on an employee's performance in the workplace can be helpful, but then educating people around steps that they can take to address these areas, if you will. I relate back to bedside manners or physicians. I think for a long time, we believed that you either had bedside skills or you did not. And we left it at that, believing that either you were born with it, and importantly, it was reinforced while you were raised as a child, or you just did not have it. And I think we know today that's just not right, that everyone has the capability to improve their interpersonal skills and address these soft skills, if you will, or these other factors that directly relate to an individual's productivity in the workplace.
Absolutely. What's interesting about that is one of RemotelyMe's clients today is actually a leading healthcare organization. And we are doing exactly that. We are measuring their physicians in relation to some of these soft skills and also their profile and how well they fed, et cetera. But also we're looking at how stress factors and other factors within the environment can impact these, and measuring some of the top performers against those that maybe are having difficulties to see where those impacts might lie. So getting the data, and then of course helping those individuals to be able to deal with that, I think is very important, especially for any doctor that I would like to visit. But let's talk a bit more about some of the things that we're seeing in relation to these soft skills, et cetera. Because in relation to what those soft skills should be, we mentioned LinkedIn, we mentioned Harvard. There's also Society of Human Resources Management, SHRM, many others that concur for the most part that there are around 9 or 10 of these key soft skills. We all know communications, emotional intelligence, et cetera, but we can't expect someone to be 100% in all of those. Someone that maybe is tremendous at communications may not be so great in terms of analyticals, whereas maybe a fantastic engineer would be super great analytically, but maybe the communications aren't as strong. And that has a lot to do with the way our brains are wired. So I'm going to flip back to you, Jon, for a minute to talk about how perhaps these soft skills can be directly related to our biological wiring, if you will, and just how individual we are. What's your thinking about this?
I'm sorry, Bill, was that for me?
Yes, sorry.
Okay, no. So I wholeheartedly agree with you. I think first thing first, let's all agree that not everyone scores 100% in every category. Everyone has their strengths and everyone has their opportunities. And to your point, you could have high emotional intelligence, but be a average or less than average communicator, if you will. So I think first thing first, helping individuals and companies understand that we aren't necessarily looking to identify the person who scores 100% in all these categories, but better discern where their strengths are and where their not weaknesses, but opportunities are. And I say opportunities because these weaknesses aren't fixed per se. They are opportunities because these are areas that should the individual understand them and be able to learn about them, they can improve upon them. Now, a lot of us, most individuals, have trouble at times identifying where those opportunities lie. So tools that enable them to understand where those opportunities are, areas they can strengthen to come up to par with other higher performing areas, assuming they're willing and interested, those are areas that absolutely can be improved upon. But first it's recognizing that no one's going to score 100 across the board. Second, it's helping them recognize where these opportunities are. And third, helping them with the education and the training that may lift these specific areas.
Yeah, can't argue with that at all. I think that's an excellent way to describe that. Josh, back to you. Let's say we do find these opportunities and we want to be able to help these individuals to improve. And I often liken this to not every hitter on your baseball team is going to be 325. Okay. As much as we'd love that to be the case, but we can win a World Series if we can help those hitters that are maybe 200 or below to get to the 250 mark. So let's talk about how we might be able to do that with better learning and development. So instead of some of these courses that maybe take 1 million hours to complete and they're a little bit boring, we now know that with the right visual storytelling elements in the right approach, maybe some gamification, that sort of thing, we can really make a big difference in being able to attract those individuals to these learning development courses. Video is important, of course, in our TikTok and YouTube environment, but what you're thinking about how we should be approaching this?
Well, Bill, I would say Jon probably is going to be a better expert on this as a doctor, a medical doctor, but we all have, we do not have infinite memory spans or attention spans. We can only perceive or take in so much information at a time that we could actually collect, process, and then continue to add to our memory for long-term application. In the military, they use the term muscle memory. And so the concept was we learned these basic principles, and we would watch somebody do it, then we would do it, and then we continue to repeat and do it again and again and again. And eventually the concept is you become more proficient, you become an expert through muscle memory and repetition. But for organizations, these days, they can't always rely on the fact that we can give an infinite time span for that muscle memory to kick in. You need people to learn more quickly. They have to be more agile and more adept in learning. And so I think organizations have to shift. I think Jon used a word earlier, paradigm. They have to shift the learning development paradigm. And we have to develop training and deliver training and reach people where they're at. Meaning, if an organization has a particular critical skill, if we have a particular soft skill or a particular skill that we've identified that's critical universally for all of our associates or our employees to have in the workforce, then we have to develop training that's going to meet all levels of learning. Meaning we could have somebody that's very fresh and early in their career. We could have somebody that's a little bit deeper in their career. They've each had different experiences that brought them to this point. We have to meet them where they're at, and we have to deliver training that can still be measured and still provide the skills and the experiences and foster that learning so that it's not a one and done. It's kind of like that continual learning, but at least they grasp the concept and they make an improvement, or we can track improvement from the starting point to a future point. And that's critical right now, is delivering training that is effective for our associates and our employees today.
Yeah, thanks. That's great input. Jon, let's talk a bit about our veteran community. We touched on this a bit earlier, that it can be difficult to translate the military occupational specialties or readings into these civilian job roles, and perhaps doing a better job of measuring for the key soft skills that they may already possess based upon what they've done in the military could help to remove some of this hiring bias. Would you agree with that?
Wholeheartedly. I think, better understanding what those soft skills are and being able to identify them will help our veterans find the right matches for their civilian careers. I've got to go back to Josh's comment. I kept thinking to myself, right, and all these things were coming to my mind. But Bill, around training and development, I would say we've got to get creative, if you will, and think outside the box. It has to be dynamic. It has to be ongoing. What worked for us 20 or 30 years ago does not work today. I think training and development has to be tailored based upon where the individuals are, as Josh alluded to, what works for them, what engages them. And it can involve things such as gamification, if you will. One thing we're trying to do in healthcare, and it's going to take time, but it's a goal, is to try to build more patient engagement, if you will, or have patients assume responsibility and enthusiasm for what they're working on exercise-wise or disease-wise, to make them feel ownership over the process and they're improving or doing better. Same is here with employees. We want to empower them, if you will, or engage them where they are with the tools that they need to engage them, to empower them, to improve on their own, as opposed to more of a paternalistic, this is a weakness, here's a handbook you need to read, or you need to take this course, or what have you. I think that's going to be key to improving the employee-employer relationship.
Absolutely. Now, Josh, all HR execs, of course, want to ensure candidates fit with their firm's core values and their culture. How can going beyond some of these hiring biases that we've talked about by only using just the opinionated interviews, or perhaps the hiring manager thinking, yeah, they seem like a good fit or not, so that we can ensure we do have the right fit, maybe adding more data to this and looking at this more with some of the modern technologies we have?
Getting back to the point, we have to continue to upskill our hiring managers, our hiring teams, and our HR professionals in the organizations. It's not enough. There are lots of trainings out there. SHRM has endless resources for this, but we've been talking about unconscious bias and mitigating bias, I would say, for a good decade to 2 decades now. Certainly in most of my career, I've been hearing talking about these unconscious biases, and at a neuroscience level, how our brains work and the biases that are inherent in us. And so we have to be able to acknowledge that, but it's not enough to just acknowledge it. We have to do trainings, and we have to continue to educate ourselves and talk about it. It's not a training that we just a compliance check in the box anymore. It's absolutely a necessity. So many managers today, depending upon what kind of an organization that they started their career in, or what kind of an environment, what kind of industry that they worked in, they may have been limited in the experiences or exposures that they've had. And that then limits their visibility and understanding of diverse talent. If you have an individual that's only worked in a certain atmosphere or a certain industry for most of their career, they're not going to understand somebody that's coming from the military complex, or somebody that's worked overseas, or somebody that's worked in any number of environments and settings. And so being able to address that and have tools is absolutely imperative, Bill. I have this conversation almost on a daily basis. And the only tools that have historically had any significance in helping to remove some of that bias were what we call behavioral interview training questions, and behavioral interview questions, and then training our managers on how to use behavioral interview questions. But we have to do so much more than just a behavior or situational interview question. There are so many other tools and assessments that we could put into work to help us to remove some of this implicit bias or unconscious bias that we have.
Jon, let's talk about moving into the future and looking at what some of these new technologies and breakthroughs and so forth might be. So, as you know, RemotelyMe is the first to map neuroscience predictive biomarkers to career success. First of all, the soft skills, and then to career success, but also what some of these security risks might be. What's your thinking about it's time, perhaps, especially to remove some of the biases we've been talking about, to embrace some of these new technologies rather than fear them, and start looking more at how we can bring some of the neuroscience and the behavioral science into the process of not only finding, but also empowering and inspiring the right people for the right seats?
I think it's terribly important, Bill. I think this is the natural evolution of hiring, if you will. I think back during my career, and I think the number of hiring meetings that I've been involved with where we've talked about an individual's technical skills based upon their resume and what they told us during an interview. And then we went around the room to talk about how we felt about them, how they appeared, their soft skills, if you will. And I've got to tell you, in my heart of hearts, I think, that short glimpse in a candidate's soft skills at an in-person interview or today remote really is selling the process short. You aren't getting an effective look at the overall individual's character and importantly fit for a company, but that's how it's been historically done, other than some of the behavioral interview questioning that Josh alluded to. So I think the time is ripe for a more improved, more effective, more accurate way to assess candidates. And again, the beauty here is it's good for the candidate and it's absolutely good for the employer.
Fabulous. Thank you. Josh, let's talk about the new technologies on the AI side of the fence. I know there's a lot of fear around that. We've got some legal things that are cropping out, the New York 144, et cetera. But what's your opinion about perhaps also embracing some of these new capabilities, such as AI, in the hiring and training processes to reduce some of our efforts, costs, and bias?
Again, Bill, I told you I'm a huge fan of using technology, leading technology to work alongside us. But as a HR leader, talent acquisition leader particularly, since I'm on the front edge of going out and recruiting and attracting talent to my organization, but then I also have a hand in ensuring that we hire them in the right seats and that we retain them. I firmly believe in using technology, but not replacing the human-to-human interaction. So using technology to advise, to assess, and to give data, because I believe that hiring leaders, business leaders, HR leaders should use data that is available at their fingertips today to guide and help them in their decisions. That's another way that we can mitigate the biases, is by using data. And I'm sorry, in most cases, data doesn't lie. When we've collected the data, it tells a story. Now, you could say that there's different interpretations of data, and that's certainly a factor to consider. But I truly believe that using technology, using AI in a constructive manner, objective manner, is certainly a smart move for HR leaders and business leaders. But I would also share that, yes, there are a lot of concerns about how we use the technology today. A lot of organizations are scared to implement or plug AI and different technologies into their other tools, or vice versa. Moving information in and out. There's data security issues there, but there's also just questions about what is this and how is it going to work and how is it going to help us. I think those are all questions that still have to play out. But I believe organizations should embrace the technology that is being developed. And that's the only way that we're going to continue to learn on how we use technology to help us make data and well-informed decisions.
Super. Thank you for that. Now, as a veteran-owned business, RemotelyMe is on a mission to help our fellow veterans and, of course, their relatives to be able to thrive and not just survive at work. We partnered with Military Hire, one of the leading veteran job boards, et cetera. And we also work with a number of other organizations to help in this respect. So back over to you, Jon. Give us some thoughts in relation to what you see employers really should be doing to embrace and increase their desire to bring veterans and their relatives on board and how that might be able to impact and help their organizations to accomplish their goals.
You bet. So this is a conversation that we will not only have today, but we'll have it every day going forward. And it's something we need to continue to talk about. And I sing our veterans' praises high and loud and clear as often as possible, because as Josh alluded to earlier in our conversation, what they bring to the table, the unique skills that they bring to the table around team orientation, mission focus, flexibility, is invaluable to employers, candidly. And I think as employers become more and more familiar with the assets that they're bringing to the table, I expect we'll see more and more veterans hired into the right positions, and some of those barriers that have existed previously dropping, if you will.
Thanks, John. Josh, flip it back over to you. What's your thinking around hiring veterans and their relatives?
Well, I think it's one of the best decisions that any employer can do. Of course, we need to always focus on reaching other diverse talent pools as well. But I would consistently say that the military and veteran talent pool, especially in the U.S. market, but even internationally, consistently is an undertapped, underutilized talent pool for employers. And as John and I have shared, and we all know as veterans, those unique intangible skills that are part of who we are as individuals, when we bring that together and put it in the team construct, it can absolutely fundamentally propel a company forward and help it to achieve greater learning. And we all know that in order for organizations today to succeed in today's market and in today's environment, if you are not a learning organization, you're going to fail. We have to be learning organizations, and learning organizations mean that you have to have people who are willing to learn, that don't have fixed mindsets, that have open mindsets, that espouse continued learning, lifelong learning. And I would say that as military veterans, that's something that we learned, is continual learning, continual improvement, pushing ourselves forward to excellence, pushing each other towards excellence. And organizations that tap into the military veteran talent pool most often will succeed as a result.
Fabulous. Well, thank you both for joining us today. Your insights and your knowledge around all of the topics we've touched on today has just been really enlightening. I've learned quite a bit, and I'm hopeful that our audience as well. I want to remind everyone that, again, RemotelyMe is veteran-owned, and we have a passion about this. And so to allow our fellow veterans and, of course, their family members and all relatives to be able to join us in this mission, we've opened the door into our Regulation CF investment round. So you can become pre-IPO shareholders, if you will, for as little as $99. And we, again, are making this opportunity available for a short period of time. So you'll need to hurry if you want to be a part of this. You can find out more information about this by simply going to RemotelyMe.com. That's RemotelyMe.com. Right there, the top of the page is a button. It'll take you right to the page where you can learn more about this. But we encourage you to take a look at that and join us to help us blend biotech, medtech, worktech to disrupt the HR and security industries and bring more capabilities to the HR side of the world, as well as security, reduce some of these risks, and improve our ability to love our jobs and perhaps have them love us as well. So again, thank you for joining us today. John, Josh, really appreciate your time, and thanks everyone.
Pleasure.
Go on. Bye.